Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint's Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. You've heard their point, now listen to the counterpoint.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. We are coming at you on May 26, 2021. We've survived almost a little over 4 months of the Biden administration. Gosh, lots to talk about always. Before we get into that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And in our upper right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So, COVID, that's always in the news, and gosh, it seems like we can never quite get away from it, and certainly one of the huge impacts, excuse for the government, one of the biggest excuses the government has had for taking a bite out of our liberty in this country. Now it's coming to light that a lot of the stories that came out about how this thing initially spread, that it may have actually, in fact, been from a Chinese lab. Certainly, there's been some conservative sources that have been reporting this, and they have been, panned, they've been vilified, and now Fauci himself is sort of flip-flopping on this. Before he was saying he thought this was completely from natural spread, from somehow somebody ate a bat or something in a wet food market that just happened to be next to a high-level bio lab in China, where I guess we had some experiments
in Wuhan, China. Yes.
Yeah. And now he's finally saying that, it's possible that it came from there now. Wow. And part of this is because I guess they found that some of the initial people who were contaminated were some of the people who worked at this lab.
Exactly. Yes.
Unless they had a hankering to, eat bat from the market next door. It's very likely that some of this gain of function research that was going on there is the culprit. But again, the story's not completely final, and given that we poo-pooed the story for almost a year, and didn't allow for an investigation, didn't push China into having investigators come there and check out the lab. Who knows if we'll ever find all of the truth to this story. But that said, transparency and the idea that, it really tells a story, I think, about the media and how corrupted by politics it's been in the last few years. And the idea that if somebody comes out with a potential credible story, how blind one side can actually be to it if it doesn't fit their narrative. It just absolutely.
Boy, you're digging us deeper and deeper, aren't you? One thing's for absolute certain: YouTube is going to delete this video from their website. I don't care what Anthony Fauci said; it's going to delete it. We can't have these people, these three yahoos, telling everybody what Anthony Fauci had finally admitted to, and then blaming the mainstream media and us too, now that we're pretty much mainstream, YouTube, Facebook, for deleting everybody else for saying it in the past. We're going to double down and keep deleting. And so this is it for us, okay? The rest of the show is on us right now. We might as well just relax and talk about, I don't know, sports or something.
By the way, for you guys who are listeners, we've actually had a few of our shows that have been yanked by YouTube just because they didn't like things that we said, which just amazes me. I mean, you don't agree with the official narrative. If you don't say everything that's going on with the official narrative, then somehow that can get you.
If I had a cap, I'd be putting a feather in it right now.
Yeah. But in this case, in this particular time, we are actually amplifying Fauci's direction.
That's right.
Yes, it won't matter. It won't matter to YouTube. They know better than we do.
Yeah, we cannot We cannot think for ourselves. You know, that is the main problem here. But in furtherance of us heading down this path of not caring about what YouTube thinks about this. But I don't know if you remember, but some time ago when Donald Trump was still president, he and his Secretary of State did suggest that this thing might have come out of a lab in China, in Wuhan, China. But you know what happened? Everybody in the media in particular, oh my goodness, these people are so crazy, right? Especially Trump was just a racist, a xenophobe for all those things that he was saying about China and about all those things that happened that came out of that lab. But now look at what's happening now. Now all of a sudden, the media have found a little bit of religion now, and suddenly they have started to tell us, well, maybe it might have come from the lab. Fauci himself, who originally said, oh, it's most likely that this came naturally and it jumped from species to from some species to another species, that is from a bat to a human or something like that. Oh, that was his first statement. Now he's saying, oh, now he's have this weak endorsement of the investigation. Oh, yes, it should be investigated to find out what happened. When he know all along what's going on, the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, our tax dollars, was given to some third party who did end up giving some money to that institute in China.
Work being done there, yeah.
Yeah, they gave, and they were doing this gain of function research. Now, I don't know what the hell that is, okay? I don't know what gain of function it could be talking about, unless you're talking about some sort of biological warfare or something like that. I don't even know what the hell this is. Gain of function. I keep hearing about it, and I don't know what it is. But the fact of the matter is, something was going on in that lab in China. We don't know what it is, and I'm not going to speculate totally. I can speculate a lot, but I'm not going to do that right now. But there was something going on in that lab in China, and it's about time we find out about this, because we need to know what the hell was going on to make sure it don't happen again.
Tim, we're digging the hole so deep, Tim, that we're going to wind up in China.
I'm thinking
right next to that lab.
Leon, don't hold back. Just speculate all you want. We're done already, so it just doesn't matter. But I was also thinking when Leon was talking about Trump being accused of racism, it was, I'll tell you why, Leon, because we all know. I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing. We all know how good at quality control the Chinese are. I mean, just look at how wonderfully clean their atmosphere is. We all know they are sticklers for quality and always have been. And so to say something like Trump did, or now Fauci is saying that, oh, maybe it leaked out of a lab. A lab? Are you kidding? That is so racist. That is just insinuating the Chinese are not sticklers for quality. And when you, well, of course, I got an iPhone, okay, says made in China, all right, but yeah, there's exceptions to the rule, and I'm sure, and this is an example, there you go, of quality engineering from the Chinese, where they can. I'm not saying they can't, okay, because I'm not trying to be racist. I'm trying not to be racist, actually. So, but yeah. All right, never mind. I'm done being silly. This is all for naught, anywho.
You know, there's a little bit of an anecdote I wanted to add into this as well. Just thinking about it when you talked about China's standards and how they're a little bit different from ours here in the United States on a lot of things.
Judging from air quality reports,
yeah.
yes.
Well, especially since you mentioned air quality, there was a little anecdote I wanted to mention. So, as many of you may have seen, people in the past, in maybe even less than a decade in the past, or a little more than that, I guess, have been regularly wearing masks in a lot of the big cities of China. And some of that is because the air quality is so bad. I mean, literally, it looks like the city is, some of these are in perpetual fog almost. And we have what we call here an air quality index, and we'll publish that in our papers. And it's a way people can kind of gauge how healthy the air is every day if they want to go out and do stuff. And, usually this is somewhere under 100, it's usually considered, this is pretty good, I guess. You would like to see the numbers go lower and lower, and that generally corresponds. Okay, the numbers are so high in some of these places in China, they're literally off the charts that we use in this country. So that tells you how bad some of the stuff is that's going on in some of those places. And I remember reading a story from NPR about 10 years ago or so, and the country would be telling its citizens on the radio, looks like another cloudy day, or not cloudy, foggy day. Excuse me, foggy day. Exactly. I mean, literally just kind of lying to their citizens about how unhealthy the air was that they were breathing. So I just a side anecdote of kind of if they do that with their air quality, it gives you pause on some of these other items too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, how good are they? Cleanliness standards in a lab that has contagious diseases in its inside of it. Anyway, I mean, how would you? You're the worker there at the Wuhan lab, and you're walking out into just nastiness because of smog and stuff. So, I mean, it's just a cultural thing, Again, it's had nothing to do with race. It's just a cultural thing. And so, there's just a dropping of your guard in many other ways. I mean, it's so different than the way it is in an industrialized nation that we consider advanced, like in Europe and the United States. Just different.
But this whole thing, the transparency in this whole pandemic, transparency from China have been nothing short of appalling when you think about it, because recently we just found out that two researchers in that very lab that is the Institute of Virology, I believe it is, two of them had some COVID-like symptoms since November or December. We just found that out. Are you making this up? This is not speculation.
Speculation.
When you say November, December, are you talking about 2019 or 2020?
2020.
Okay, 2020.
No,
that's
way
2019.
I think he means
2019. I'm sorry.
2019. I just wanted to clarify that so we know.
2019.
Speculation straight here, Leon.
Yes, yes. 2019. It was just discovered in 2019, November or December. There were two researchers from that lab, the Institute of Virology, who had COVID-like symptoms. So it is quite possible. It is quite possible that this lab leak theory is based on solid evidence. It's quite possible. We don't know for sure, and I wouldn't speculate any further, but it sure looks that way.
Well,
right?
The bottom line is, if you ever have a situation like this, you want there to be the transparency where people go in and they immediately do a third-party investigation. Not
exactly.
It's just crazy, the idea that we haven't, and we're going to all sit here with a straight face and say, well, we'll just have to trust them.
Tell me this thing. Tell me this thing.
Yeah.
I think Ronald Reagan was the one who first said, trust but verify. Yeah. And I think that's what we should do right now.
Yeah. Well, speaking of COVID issues and some of the craziness that's been going along with those, the prisons have been an area that have been kind of problematic during this whole COVID crisis. So as you'll remember, a lot of places in the United States and in some other countries too, they actually let their prisoners or large numbers of prisoners out because they weren't sure how to deal with it. I mean, they had this pandemic, and it's like, well, who's going to be responsible if these guys get sick? And so you think, wow, this is literally, how our government handles something. They put these people in prison because they're a risk to society. But then when they're suddenly a risk to the prison are we going to be liable if these guys get sick? And they just let that risk out in society.
The vast majority are put there not because they're a risk to society, but because they're a risk to themselves because they sold dope to somebody. That's what it is. That's what it is. Or they took dope or something. That's the vast majority. And the guy that, well, you're going to tell the story about the guy that's suing the California?
Well, yeah. And so the idea is, aside from the fact that we've let a lot go, there's been some that weren't let go, and some did get sick in the prisons as people got sick everywhere. You know,
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like this just happened only in prisons. And so a few people died in the prisons, and now these prisoners are suing the states where there's lawsuits in there's lawsuits all around the country, in California, in Michigan, and many other
places.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so this is kind of a big question, and maybe a question for libertarians too, to kind of scratch their heads about. But what duty does the state have to prisoners when somebody has done something to society to have their rights taken away? When they violated other people's rights, what, I guess, where should the balance fall as far as continuing to protect the public at the expense of the prisoner, or allow the prisoner out at the expense of the public? I mean, this is kind of this is a real question, a real world question that potentially leads to crime and other problems in society. So I don't know. What do you guys think about this?
Well, since I've been starting first for a while, the habit is hard to let go of. Maybe they started thinking, gee, why are we locking these people up for selling marijuana or for selling cocaine or heroin or something? Maybe we really don't need to, after all. It was just a mutually beneficial exchange between willing participants. Guess what? Those mutually beneficial exchanges just continued unabated after we put those people in prison. So it didn't slow it down. It just changed the participants. It just changed who it was. Yes. It's like is to think that nobody's snorting coke anymore after the Joe Blow, the salesman, got put in prison. Oh, gee whiz, that coke is not going to be sold to somebody else now that he's not there to sell it. So maybe they started thinking, maybe some of these laws we have can be postponed in the sake of not getting sued. I mean, the government's not worried about the health of anyone. They're not worried about the health of the general public or the safety. They're not worried about it. This is my libertarian opinion here, YouTube, now that I'm gone anyway. They're not worried about the health of the inmate. They are worried about getting sued. Okay, and they're thinking they at least knew that much. They had that much prescient abilities to see that they were going to get sued if people got this disease while they were under their custody. Kind of like a kid. It's like, do you have child custody of that child? So yeah, and if you do, you probably don't want to give the kid COVID. And the same thing with the poor innocent prisoner for selling dope. Anyway, what do you think, Leon?
Well, I mean, I know it is true that it might be a issue of people being wrongfully in prison for making voluntary exchanges through selling dope, that kind of stuff. But this covers all prisoners. It's a class action suit that covers all prisoners.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think these lawsuits have a legal leg to stand on. Okay, and then this is just my opinion, YouTube, and as a novice lawyer. The fact of the matter is, these people are suing under the constitutional prohibition against the government about cruel and unusual punishment. But the government was not inflicting any cruel and unusual punishment by the infection of COVID, because all of us were suffering from the same, potentially suffering from the same disease. It is not to say it was just afflicted upon prisoners. It's just that they were in a situation where it potentially could spread, because in crowded spaces, it tends to spread a little more. But these are people who already gave up their liberties, gave up their rights by inflicting their damage upon other people. That's how they ended up in prison. So they cannot now turn around and sue the government for cruel and unusual punishment when the same thing, the COVID disease that is afflicting them and is also afflicting us.
Yeah.
We're protecting ourselves from them.
Yeah.
So I don't think this thing has a legal leg to stand on. And I hope the judges kick this out whenever it gets to court. I hope it is dismissed as soon as possible, even though there are a lot of things I could complain about concerning the COVID and government action, but this is not one of them.
Yeah. Sounds like a man of principles to me.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much.
And I mean that. Even though I might be chuckling, I do mean that sincerely.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
not that anyone will see this video on YouTube, but anyway.
There's a little
faith,
something,
brother. Come on, have some faith. We may fight through and live through this.
There's a little something to both of what you guys are saying. I mean, certainly some of these guys who were breaking into cars and stealing cars and being re-released right afterwards because, there's no bail and hey, there's COVID and everything else and re-put back out on the street. Obviously, that's a person who is violating other people's, liberty. But then on the other hand, we do imprison an awful lot of people too for, voluntary exchanges. We just have a majority that want to push their preference on everybody else and say that some activities, even if they're voluntary, shouldn't be legal. So anyways, but, it's funny. There was another story going back to our first one with Fauci and the media and how, stories are just, suppressed or shaded in order to support a narrative. And we had a case like that with 60 Minutes in Florida. They were interviewing Governor Ron DeSantis. And he wasn't
interviewed for the story, but go ahead. Yeah, so
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess he was giving a press conference. Yeah, and it had to deal with some of their activities in getting the vaccine out, and they were getting them out through a certain chain, and the 60 Minutes tried to spin the story to make it sound like there was corruption, that this certain chain of stores was getting it because they had a sweetheart deal with the governor. And the governor had clearly explained to them why that chain of stores was getting it early, because they were ready to get it early, whereas the others weren't. 60 Minutes cut all that out of their story so that you didn't hear any of that. And you just heard him kind of arguing back with the reporter. And this is just really dangerous, what we're seeing with the media, where, you toe a certain line or you're going to be canceled, you're going to be misrepresented,
vilified.
And this is really dangerous in the society. I mean, we have to be able to have some chance of looking at objective information. Reporters should be kind of like scientists. They should be trying to collect objective information and present it to us, and it's up for us to figure out what we want to do with that information.
Exactly.
This is kind of scary. You guys have any thoughts on it?
Take it away, Leon.
Okay, thanks, Tim. The chain you're talking about is Publix groceries. They are well-known chain in Florida. I've been in many of them in Florida when I go there to visit my sister. But the point is though, all the media is trying to do now is to Ron DeSantis what they've been trying to do to Donald Trump all this time. If they can't get him on something actual, they'll make up something to get him on. Now, it is true that Publix gave the DeSantis campaign $100,000. That is true. Nobody's disputing that. And the DeSantis campaign is not disputing that either. But what CBS did was they took little pieces of information, some pieces of information, little grains of truth, and they made it into this mismatch of this great conspiracy. It was so conspiratorial and so nonsensical, even two Democrats, listen to this, Ron DeSantis is a Republican, two Democrats had to come out and defend the man to say how CBS was so corrupt in their reporting.
They were Florida Democrats, by the way. It was Florida local Democrats. Yeah.
Yes, Florida Democrats. That's right. But the point is, though, and I think this was in that video that you sent, it really made this point. The point is, though, these people with their nonsense is really helping Ron DeSantis because they're making him into a martyr of their corrupt reporting and their yellow journalism. That's what's going on there.
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop now.
sound of the time for our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, where we find something silly, maybe sillier than the stories we've been talking about to end the show off on. And in this case, it's a MSNBC reporter, or anchor rather, Brian Williams. And essentially, he was talking about the GOP Senator Ron Johnson. And he called him essentially a Russian asset because he said Ron Johnson said he wasn't going to take the COVID vaccine. And the reason he wasn't going to take the COVID vaccine was because he already had been exposed to and had COVID. So he already had the antibodies, and that's why he was going to take it. What Williams said is, he said, I know really smart, educated, substantial people who believe him, Johnson, to be a witting or an unwitting asset of Russia. Who would sound a lot like that in American society? Just, everything is Russia, Russia, Russia. Everybody's a Russian asset if you don't go lock, stock, and barrel along with whoever's in charge in the Democratic Party. I don't know. You guys have any thoughts? It's almost like there's. I
just want to mention my favorite
virus.
My favorite Russian asset is Tulsi Gabbard. Leon, what do you think? Who's your favorite Russian asset?
Brian Williams. Brian Williams is a reporter here, and he is a piece of work. This was the guy who lost his anchor job on NBC. Okay. And that's why he's now on MSNBC. He lost his anchor job in NBC, which is probably one of the most prestigious positions that network has. He lost that job because he was lying about how he went somewhere and they landed and they were hit by RPG and all kind of stuff. He made up this whole story about how
he was under fire.
Yeah. He was under fire.
But
he braved it, and he went out there, and he still reported on whatever he had to report. This guy lost his job, and now here he is, Ron Johnson, who has a legitimate reason for not taking the vaccine, which is that he more than likely has antibodies within him, has a very legitimate reason. This is a guy that now is going to turn around and say, oh, you know what? Ron Johnson really and truly is a Russian asset. And he didn't say it with the admiration that Tim says about Tulsi,
From Russia with love.
And
he says, Ron
let it be
is
known.
a bad kind of Russian asset.
Let it be known that Tim admires Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes.
Well, the funny thing is with Brian Williams and that fake news story that he gave so many years ago about being under fire, nobody realized he was just ahead of the curve. He's just so far ahead of the curve, nobody appreciated it at the time, and so he got demoted.
Poor baby.
But we're a little behind the curve on time at the moment. We're just about out of time, so we're going to have to call it. But thanks so much for joining us on this episode, and we'll see you at the next one. Until then, stay free.
And Tulsi,